Good. All right. No one else is trickling in right now. So thanks again, everyone, for joining. We have roughly an hour, well, an hour scheduled for this presentation. It's the first of a series of six presentations that OpenBG has worked to line up for employers of SOP and AgStream workers. That's the main focus. There's also relevance to folks that have seasonal workers, for a few months. Um, so Sean, Chadwick, and Kristen Hoffman, I want to thank you two from WSPS for making this event happen. Kristen will be the health and safety consultant from WSPS that's actually giving us the update. And I like to keep things fairly kind of fluid. If people have questions that are relevant to the slide at hand, raise your hand if you want, or type a question into the chat box. Between myself and Gordon and Kristen and Sean, we'll try to get to your question in real time. And I think that's all I want to say for now. Unless Gordon, you think there's something else good. All right, Kristen, with no further ado.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much to OFVGA, Stefan, yourself, and the representatives within your organization, as well as Sean. We are delighted to partner with you for this series over I'll call it summer, since it does feel that way today, and it will continue on through to August of this year. And truly, we are beginning at the beginning in topic, which is the topic of onboarding and training employees. And as indicated, we will put focus on those who are seasonal or temporary, short term, but perhaps may join you year over year over year, although there is some space and time in between their start each of those years. So, to discuss the topic of effective and efficient onboarding, I will welcome all of our participants as well as those representatives of OFVGA to share your experiences as well as indicated your questions throughout. And I will ask Stefan to support in monitoring that chat if there is something that does not catch the corner of my eye that is worthwhile to pause and discuss in that moment. I am delighted to do so.
Perfect. And I'll just jump in. I see a lot of people don't have their mics muted. If you could mute them, that'd be great. If someone keeps theirs on and there's background noise, I think I'll just use moderators' prerogative to mute loud mics. Good. Thank you.
Thanks,
Back to you.
Stefan. So to that point, some of the features within this platform that I am sure you are familiar with, but to reinforce, you do have the chat available where at any point I will encourage you to share whatever those thoughts may be, whether related to experiences or questions, and we will attend to those. And as Stefan indicated as well, if you wish to join us with unmuting, raise that virtual hand and we will absolutely attend to that request. This opportunity really is for us to share from Workplace Safety and Prevention Services some of the requirements and resources to support your operations, but also for networking among the group here who have very like-minded, like-oriented operations within the province. So no doubt you will learn as much from each other as you will through the content of the presentation. Some of the specifics that we will explore together are the basics, the beginning, which involves internal responsibility system and rights that are established in the province to reinforce the reason that onboarding specifically and all training in the workplace truly are requirements for employers, supervisors, and workers to fulfill, and then move our way toward the strategies to do that well, efficient, and effective. And there are many resources such as templates and other tools available to support you in fulfilling those obligations. We will explore some of those together, including some of the links to access items such as a map, or the step-by-step plan available to implement your health and safety program, including training, as well as a practical tool to generate, develop, or create an employee handbook that is available through WSPS. And for those who may not be so familiar with WSPS, for just a moment on the organization, WSPS is an organization that is designated through legislation as the health and safety solution provider for sectors including agriculture. And agriculture has been regulated under this legislation since 2006. Coincidentally, I started with our legacy organization, Farm Safety, not too long after that date. And our mission and role in the province truly is to support you, ensure that you have the resources you need to fulfill the obligations that have been set upon operations within this sector, including their employers, supervisors, and workers. And I have had that pleasure for near a couple of decades now to more often support the agriculture sector. I'm a proud member of a family and community that is very agriculture focused, and it is so wonderful that my work keeps me within the place where my heart lies. So, to talk about some of that beginning and the basics, noting that agriculture as a sector has been regulated under the Occupational Health and Safety Act for that near 2 decades at this point, the legislation perhaps prompted some more formal implementation of health and safety programs, even where farms may have already had this content in place and at work. Some of that formalization does require topics like those who are new, vulnerable, or otherwise, and onboarding or arriving at your workplaces to ensure there is protection of losses, prevention of incidents for the good of those workers as well, all the way through to our supervisors, employers, and your operations as a whole. Now, within this legislation, as you may be familiar, there are three primary roles that we focus on within the internal responsibility system. And this system truly sets out duties as well as rights and expectations for that management of exposure to risks so that we are able to achieve that prevention of incidents within workplaces. Those strategies truly involve hazard identification through to control. And often training is an example of a method for control to reduce that likelihood of exposure to risks that may result in those losses. And what better time to start than right at the beginning before exposure to those risks through something like an onboarding program. Employers, supervisors, and workers each have responsibilities in the health and safety program, including training from the communication of information to the use of the information within the workplace. Now, we also have the health and safety representative or joint health and safety committee, depending on the structure of your workplace, who has presence to evaluate how is it going? How effective and efficient is the internal responsibility system, health and safety program, right through to topics such as onboarding, and recognize where there may be opportunities for improvement and make those suggestions to the employer to implement where reasonable. Now, to consider a little more specifically each of those three roles with that focus on onboarding and training, employers of workers, workers of any type, permanent, temporary, seasonal, those who are local, those who are not, as part of a program such as AgStream or the Temporary Foreign Agricultural Worker Program, have the same responsibilities for those workers, which ultimately include to provide information instruction, and supervision to those individuals to protect their health and safety. And one of the great resources for our employers are the supervisors to support in that responsibility. Employers must appoint what are described as competent supervisors. Competent means individuals have knowledge about the work and how to organize it to be efficient and effective, but also protective from those losses. Also, as a competent individual, supervisors must be familiar with the legislation that applies to the work. So they are able to communicate those minimum requirements to workers and then evaluate their performance to those standards. And in particular to the work, competent supervisors will also be familiar with the hazards that may result in exposures to risks and the controls or solutions in place to manage those exposures. Ideally to eliminate that potential for losses, but if not eliminate, certainly reduce or manage those potential exposures to a level that is acceptable or reasonable in the workplace. Now, employer responsibilities continue along to include some specific policies and procedures, which become topics that are relevant to include in your beginning discussions with employees, such as through your onboarding program. Your general health and safety policy that sets out your commitment to ensure everyone does end their workday in a healthy and safe way so they can go on to enjoy their evening until their next workday. Also, the workplace harassment prevention policy and workplace violence prevention policy. Those may be one in the same or may be separate documents in your workplaces. The content of these policies and the procedures that implement these topics are valuable to share with employees early at the point of their beginning of work with you. And for those who return, consider that refresh, especially with review and perhaps update to these topics as you go along. In the bold and green is that general duty that employers, and as we will review in a moment, supervisors have in place in Ontario to take every precaution reasonable. So it would be reasonable and almost becomes an expectation to share any of the information with workers they need before exposure to risks for their protection. Again, to eliminate or reduce that likelihood of losses occurring within the workplace. So further topics beyond the general topics such as health and safety policy, violence and harassment prevention policy, we consider what are the exposures? Where are there opportunities for things to go wrong, for individuals to experience injuries, illnesses, perhaps even as minor as property damage or as severe as fatalities, and recognize where there is information valuable to share before those exposures do occur within the workplace. Now, in support of the employer, as mentioned, one of the greatest resources are the
Krista,
supervisors. Yeah,
sorry to interrupt. Could we just
please,
go back to the previous slide? I'm
of course.
always I always try to be mindful of we have different commodities and different sizes. I'm gonna go out on a limb and say most people have more than 5 regular employees. So if you have 6 or more employees kind of on a regular basis during the season or for the full year, then the health and safety representative would be an expectation for your farm, and that would be for all commodities. And then the joint health and safety committee, I don't think I need to tell the greenhouse folks about that. They're well aware of that. Just wanted to point out that it's only greenhouse that needs to worry about the joint health and safety committee. If you don't operate a greenhouse, that item is not applicable to you. Okay, thank you.
Thanks so much, Stefan. Yeah, the beauty and challenge of agriculture and the legislation in place is there are limitations and nuances to consider. So yes, do consider the commodity and the requirements that might be set within the regulations for you. And agreed, within the group of fruit and vegetable growers, more likely only the greenhouse operations where the committee would become the requirement. Thanks again. For that role of the supervisor, truly the supervisor will take the information that the employer has prepared and indicated as significant to share with employees and perform that share. Communicate, train, coach, mentor, guide the employees in their work, and the check-in, evaluation through supervision on some frequency to ensure that employees do indeed implement the information that they have been provided, and perhaps correct along course if and where necessary, and then certainly reinforce when things are to that standard, work is performing to the expectation that the employer has set and the supervisor has communicated. Noting that the supervisor also has that same general duty to take every precaution reasonable. And if we expand upon the few words on the screen for a moment in application, for both the employer and supervisor, this is what we refer to as due diligence in practice. This is the broad responsibility often noticed in use in agriculture, since there is little in the way of specific or prescription of topics, including training. We step back and consider what is reasonable for the protection of workers. It may not be every precaution, but what is every reasonable precaution that we can implement? Like when workers do arrive, we gather together as a group and we have a discussion about the expectations, their tasks, the devices, controls, and personal protective equipment or otherwise available to support their protection. How employees would report if there is a challenge to fulfill those expectations safely. So some of those policies, procedures that may be that little bit more nuanced and in practice really do come back to still a responsibility falling within that due diligence in practice. Now, our workers, as I am sure you are familiar, also have responsibility within this legislation. And in application to this topic of onboarding and further training, employees must use the information, the expectations that have been set and communicated with our employees. They are obligated to follow those standards. And as mentioned in the previous comment, if there's a challenge to do so, they are also obligated to raise that concern. So consider how employees could or would raise that concern or ask that question. Perhaps forecast what questions or concerns may come about and share that information within the training that you provide as well. Year over year, reflect on how did it go last year? What information did we have to correct along course? And include that as part of the beginning when we are providing information to employees.
And Kristen, just clarification.
Please.
When it comes to reporting any hazard, is it satisfactory for the worker to report a hazard to their health and safety rep, or does it have to be to the supervisor?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the obligation in the act is that workers will report hazards and a few other things to their employer or supervisor. Now, in many settings, with the health and safety representative, or perhaps it is the larger joint health and safety committee, there may be encouragement or opportunity to share suggestions, recommendations to those groups that could move forward as opportunities for improvement. But truly, the responsibility lies with the worker to report hazards to their employer or supervisor, since the employer and supervisor have authority to manage those hazards, and more often sooner rather than the later that might become through recommendation from the committee or the representative. So that's the basics. Yeah. Now, in support of the rights established for workers, when we consider the topic of onboarding and further training. That is the most common, effective, and efficient method to support the right to know. Every worker in Ontario, regardless of their residence location, their permanency or not, have the right to know about hazards that may result in exposures to risks in the workplace and how to manage those exposures. As well, if something does go wrong, like an incident or loss, who is available to support those individuals? Now, further, workers in Ontario have the right to participate in their health and safety program, as well as the right to refuse what is described as unsafe work, which does have a procedure associated through the legislation. Now, in support of the right to know through onboarding and further training, it is important to share not only the responsibilities as described, but also these basic rights that employees do have the right to participate, as well as the right to refuse unsafe work, and what the expectations might be around these topics, how to report hazards or make suggestions, just as described a moment ago, who to share that information with. Similarly, what type of work may be considered unsafe and how to make that report and to whom to action that investigation process. Now, some of the regulations made under the Occupational Health and Safety Act may be valuable to share in short or perhaps for some employees in a little further detail. One of those that we will have a closer look at together is Regulation 297, Occupational Health and Safety Awareness and Training. And truly, this is a regulation that is about onboarding, the beginning of work of a worker at a workplace. The other regulations that we have noted on the screen now may be applicable to your operations and would be reasonable and become an expectation that as employers and supervisors, you are familiar with the contents that are applicable to your operations. So let us explore for a moment Regulation 297 a little further in support of training. Now, this legislation has been around just over a decade, and from that point has been applicable to farming operations. This topic is often provided or validated during that startup of a worker in a workplace. And provided meaning through resources made available from the Ministry of Labor, Immigration, Training and Skills Development, which I believe are resources available to you through many of the associations as well as our organization, and right on to the ontario.ca website. You can navigate to e-learning modules as well as the opportunity to request printed workbooks to fulfill this expectation. For an employer, the expectation is that supervisors will complete a basic occupational health and safety awareness training by prescription in the regulation, which includes 5 topics or 5 steps within 1 week of becoming a supervisor. So those who have care and control over people or process within the workplace. The expectation for employers as well is to ensure that workers complete that basic occupational health and safety awareness program by prescription in the regulation, which includes 4 topics or 4 steps. Either the e-learning module or the workbook on completion fulfill the content requirement in this regulation. Now, the regulation does go on to state that the employer must maintain as well as provide records of training, and providing those records would be prompted if requested by a worker. Perhaps that worker is moving from your workplace to another. that worker can take that record of training along with them, which also means as employers, you have the opportunity to validate if supervisors and workers have previously completed this training on arrival to your workplace. So long as the individual will provide you with a record of training that aligns with the content requirements in the regulation, that training is complete. You may make the decision to not refresh on that same content and instead move perhaps to more specific content for your operation. So as an employer, once more, to provide or validate that every supervisor and worker who will work for you has completed this basic training program. And I will be sure to share some resources right at the end that include links to those resources from the ministry on the topic. Now, beyond that regulation expectation for onboarding or basic training for supervisors and workers, recall that the employer must provide information, instruction, and supervision to a worker to protect the health and safety of individuals in the workplace. Now, if we break down that term information for a moment, information intends that it is in an appropriate language, communication method, consider literacy and the various languages that may require translation or use of pictograms and other methods to overcome any of the challenges in delivering and then understanding that information by employees. Hazards and controls are the topics of information to share, and there may be reference materials, templates, forms, as well as resources such as individuals worthwhile to share within that content of your message. Now, if we break down instruction, this is the communication of the information, providing that general as well as specific training for the work that the workers will perform. And you might consider various methods or tools for that delivery. Consider job shadowing, where we might partner an individual that is newer to the exposures and work with someone who may be a return, seasoned, experienced individual, supervisor perhaps, or even that operator of farm equipment that has demonstrated their safe and effective performance year over year. Those are fantastic mentors and relationships to establish in the workplace beyond the basics of occupational health and safety training, especially for those who might stay with us for quite a while over the season, like your temporary workers. Instruction also has an expectation that the trainer, on behalf of the employer, will validate understanding of the individual. So we will provide the information in a way that is to be understood, and then we're going to check to be sure that it has been understood. Consider tools like a conversation with questions and answers, quizzes, as well as observation of performance of the work to give confidence to that trainer on behalf of the employer that, yep, they've got it. Supervision is a wonderful tool as well to perform that ongoing evaluation of performance. Do recall again, supervisors must meet that definition of competent. It is also important for our supervisors to be present. That does not suggest every moment of every workday side by side with every worker. But it may mean if it is a newer worker, or perhaps the work is new, different, or there has been some challenge with that worker previous, it might require a little more frequent presence on the part of the supervisor, a little longer presence to ensure that things are going well before that supervisor does move on to the many other tasks within their day. So important, though, that those in the role of a leader, from supervisors to employers, do have space within their day to have that presence established. Also, that gives the employees some opportunity to access their direct supervisors with those questions or challenges that might have come up. And if not in person, what other means or tools are in place for that access, like communication devices, start and end of day group meetings, perhaps. Consistency and fairness are so important under the topic of supervision as well, ensuring that there is a bit of a standard that the employer shares with the supervisor to become the procedure for the work. So the supervisor is able to then manage performance in a consistent and fair way back to that standard that has been established. Takes a little bit of the guesswork or questioning out of the process. Now, although there are requirements and must-dos related to onboarding and training, there are significant returns and benefits to implementing an effective and efficient onboarding and training program. For those who are newer to the workplace, this is the first impression. For better or worse, it brings the organization, the farm or workplace to life. It gives some insight to the way of working at that workplace, what is important to the workplace, and truly where that one individual's role fits into the overall production of the workplace. This is an opportunity to set those expectations and standards for performance, conduct, and any of the procedures that are established within the workplace. Coordination as well. Effective onboarding will ensure that there is coordination throughout individuals, perhaps areas, properties, farms, or locations that are all a part of this one workplace. And again, how do those pieces fit together? Important during that beginning and onboarding to introduce individuals to whom will become their leader, mentor, or supervisor. Let that individual be a part of that first impression as well. And of course, every interaction, including onboarding, provides the opportunity for workers to share their feedback with the workplace, with the group that they work with, as well as their supervisor. Ask some questions to prompt for that feedback. It could be related to understanding of information. It could also be related to suggestions, recommendations, and opportunities for improvement. So out of interest, I would love to hear the thoughts from you related to onboarding. In your application or your guess, who should receive onboarding at that beginning, setting that standard for the workplace, and then perhaps further training? Who do you consider as participants? And I'll leave you with a moment to share within the chat if you wish. And I'll prompt you with a few suggestions. And I welcome you to share agreement or otherwise with those suggestions. Those who are new to your workplace, those who are new to the work being performed at your workplace, perhaps those who are new to factors including the program that they are now a participant within, and new to the country, province, and city or town where your operation is functioning. Young workers. We acknowledge that those who are described as young workers up to about mid-20s in age may be more vulnerable than those with a few more years. Both new and young workers may be eager, may prefer to not ask questions, may some of the time prefer to innovate on their own accord to please or wow and impress their employer. And there may be some risks associated with those efforts. Do consider where we have both new and or young workers within the workplace, that additional time that may be necessary within your day to effectively manage and establish their performance to the standard. This is where that supervision may be required a little more often, a little longer. Thank you so much, contractors, temporary help agency workers as well. And on that note of temporary help agencies, some difference to the programs that may be familiar where we have temporary workers arriving into Canada. There are relatively new last fall requirements for those who engage with temporary help agencies to ensure the agencies are validated, the employees who are provided are prepared for the work that they will have exposure to. So as a hiring employer, do consider in your contractor and temporary worker management program some of those differences in responsibilities, from temporary foreign agricultural worker programs to temporary help agencies to contractors that may provide you with a skilled service, such as an electrician or a millwright. Regardless, all of those workers will require some specific insights to your workplace and operation for their protection. Others, those who are returning workers, may not require the entire story in onboarding each year, but certainly to dust off from year to year or years to the year that they return. And again, those who have exposure to new work, they might be promoted or transferred within your organization, perhaps a worker that has moved into the role of a supervisor, some additional responsibilities in that new role that would be reasonable to include within that onboarding and training. Visitors as well, separate from our contractors, for those who may be on farm for purpose of a tour or as a customer, is there any information, the basics, that they need to be aware of to protect them and others from any exposures to risks within the workplace? So another question for your consideration is when? When should that beginning training or onboarding occur? And I welcome you to share again in the chat your thoughts on this one and to share a few of ours as prompt before whatever the exposure might be, before whatever the need for the information might be. Set up our individuals for success with the information, resources, or tools they need before that need would arise. And that might include the first day. It might include a little while longer in their employment, but still before exposure to some new or different hazard. Consider that dust off every so often if it's been a while since we've talked about it. Schedules like a safety talk every so often over the season to keep topics that are timely and relevant to the work front of the mind for individuals may be a strategy as well. Another question for you to consider are the topics to include within your onboarding and training. And some of those mentioned to this point already in particular, such as the occupational health and safety awareness training, the basics as required within legislation. Then there might be some other should knows as well as could knows about the organization, such as the history, perhaps the structure of the organization, maybe partners and suppliers. Focus in on that must know within your onboarding, though. The details individuals will need to know to perform their work that next day. Who do I report to? Where is the personal protective equipment that I may require? How do I operate the equipment on farm? And who can I talk with as a mentor? Start with your must knows and move your way out to those should knows and could knows as a bit of a development or learn and grow opportunity. I mentioned it is important to validate, understanding, or evaluate the effectiveness of the training that has been provided to individuals. And again, I'll welcome you to share what might work well for you as strategies to ensure that individuals have got it. The information is understood and being used within the workplace. And some of our thoughts on tools or methods to consider. Perhaps it is a quiz right after the information has been provided through questions and answers, whether conversation on paper or otherwise. Individuals have the opportunity to share their responses to those questions for a bit of a check mark or X to determine where we may need to reinforce topics if not well understood. The practical, some of my favorite, the hands-on, get dirty, try the equipment, demonstrate through some observation and supervision that they've got it. Putting some of the information shared in conversation to practice. And certainly the ongoing question and answer that can be posed to their trainer or supervisor throughout the season. Things change. We have challenges such as weather, but we also have benefits such as new or different equipment that might arrive over season. Taking those opportunities to provide information at the time needed and give that opportunity throughout the season to ask questions, solicit responses from the individuals. So this question, I'll strongly encourage for participants to share their thoughts. What works well? What strategies have you found that work well for effective and efficient onboarding? When do you do it? What methods do you use for that onboarding? Is it a start of season within that first day or few of worker arrival? Everyone comes together as a large group. Do you have some information documented that you share within that session? And then perhaps partner up those who are seasoned with those who are new to establish that mentor relationship. So as I hope you do, share within the chat a few of the other thoughts on strategies to consider, including those short information sessions. Thank you so much for that thought. Tailgate or safety talks as wonderful methods or tools to use that could be done in bulk at start as well as throughout season. Consider documentation, the type of information that you will share with individuals, perhaps using a tool such as a checklist to organize that information. Keep in mind that effort necessary related to ensuring understanding, language and literacy. Ensure that it does represent your employees well. Is a translator necessary? Resources in print that may be translated into appropriate language, or an individual that is available to share in conversation, translated into the effective language. And overcoming both language and literacy, considering pictures, pictograms, videos, where we can in some way truly use one picture to tell 1,000 words of a story. Do provide training before exposure to hazards in the workplace. That may not all need to occur on the first day then, but still before the information is needed. Where we do have more vulnerable individuals in the workplace, those who are new and or young, maintain that presence. Regular contact. It may take a little more time at the start until it is established that those individuals have the understanding. We've reinforced that they've got it and continue to that standard. And we may then have a little less often or a little less duration supervision necessary. Encourage questions throughout season and certainly throughout any training interaction that we have with individuals. That helps to give confidence to the trainer and employer that we have attention and we have understanding as well. Do confirm that understanding in some method though, through records, both the records of attendance, that people were in the information session, and records to validate their understanding, whether based on observation, the responses to questions and answers, some means to demonstrate that not only, as some might suggest, there was a bum in a seat or a participant in the session, but also the information was understood and then used within the workplace. Some tools for you to consider. Consider a tour of the workplace as well as housing, if applicable for your operation. We might have sessions that are in person as well as online or virtual with support of means such as webinars, videos, and e-learning modules. Do consider group activity as well, especially when beginning those relationships between employees who might be with us round the clock for round the months of your season. Give that opportunity for networking to establish cohorts, perhaps those who may house together, if that is applicable for your operation. Consider tools as well, such as group chats or methods where those cohorts or supervisors to the employees they have responsibility over can quickly and effectively send information to those they have responsibility over. The mention of checklists, policies, procedures, and templates, I'll return to in a moment as well through a few resources. And those mentors, opportunities for job shadowing, and working closely with supervisors will be so valuable as tools. Great question, Sarah. I'll come to that one in just a moment on the topic of first aid training. Now, to support you through resources of our association as well as others, Workplace Safety and Prevention Services does have an agriculture and horticulture safety center, curated resources for this sector, from checklists to pictograms that may be valuable in support of your onboarding, further training, and overall your health and safety program. Also, within our organization, a small business center, and I'll focus in on a couple of the specific tools available through the small business center. The safety roadmap, which is available through this QR code as well. I will share that link in just a moment. The safety roadmap includes checklists as well as a bit of a step-by-step plan for implementing a health and safety program. Beyond the safety roadmap, in general description, here are some of the topics you would find for that step-by-step, from duties such as those described together today to topics such as training. And within training in particular, when we open up each of these, there are more resources. Training opens up with downloads as well as online resources and otherwise to support you. As a few examples, training includes checklists for operations with set number of employees. And as a nod to a comment made by Stefan, some of those nuances and limitations for agriculture in general, and then the commodity you may represent, may be points to consider as you do review these checklists. Ensure that in application of the checklist, it does represent your firm well. These are somewhat general, to be fair, and we are happy to help guide you through those checklists to be specific for you. Further on within training, the ministry resources to accomplish the basic training are available, including the e-learning modules, as well as access to request those printed workbooks. And another to note is the Health and Safety Handbook Generator, a resource also within the Small Business Center that you are able to access through this QR code. And once more, I will share with you the link to that generator. Jumped ahead on myself here. Within the handbook generator, for those who may not have resources to accomplish this topic otherwise, such as through other associations, this handbook includes a library of hazards and controls. The expectation is more will be added to that library, in particular for farming operations. So I will encourage you once again, review the content, ensure it is correct and represents your operation well. The beauty of the handbook is with entry of some basic information about your operation that you know so well and selection of hazards from the library. The tool will prepare a downloadable and then printable, if you wish, handbook that is shareable with individuals in your workplace as a tool to support your training program. Now, on that question of first aid training, I'll attend to that now and we'll go on to those few links. First aid training is a requirement for workplaces in Ontario, and depending on number of workers and type of workplace, the training level may differ. I will encourage that at least one individual with standard first aid training and CPR is available in the workplace at all times. Now, for some types of workplaces, and based on numbers of employees as well, emergency level may be the prescribed minimum. Training nonetheless for a first aid attendant, and the expectation is that individual is available at all times that work occurs. So one is a minimum. And for coverage purpose, we would recommend 2 or more. And when you do have multiple locations, consider the accessibility of those first aid attendants to each of those locations. First aid equipment and kits have a prescription in a similar way based on number of employees and types of workplaces. For your first aid certificates or records, there is an expectation that the certificates are posted at the first aid stations in the workplace. That may be one or multiple, depending on the scope of your operations. And again, those kits may be one or multiple. And I will share that for many operations that are quite spread, where we may have people move from one block of property to another throughout their workday, it may be reasonable then that the vehicle that will move with those individuals does have the first aid station, the kit with the equipment, as well as an attendant in care of that equipment that will move from each of those locations as well. Keep in mind that purpose of first aid is to immediately respond. So ensure that we do have that accessibility. Okay. And I'll come to that record of cleaning in just one moment as well. It has prompted quite a bit of discussion in sessions over the last while. So to share with you some of the resources that have been mentioned, the Agriculture and Horticulture Safety Center, as well as Small Business Center, are available through the WSPS.ca website, including the tools suggested of the safety roadmap and the handbook generator. Additionally, checklists that are available for development and implementation of your health and safety program for agriculture with, again, mindfulness to those nuances of commodities are available based on different numbers of employees. Also through WSPS.ca, we have a few resources that you might use as tools in your orientation and further training. We do have an orientation e-course for new workers in general, as well as new agricultural workers that do attend to many of the topics in the basic training. Additionally, a resource prepared by one of our partners within the sector, so thank you to Jeffrey's Greenhouses, who helped along in how to produce your own short training videos. Now, although developed at a floral operation, the concepts are relevant for any type of operation. Quick videos through your own devices, such as a phone, that can be utilized to support your training. And beyond the WSPS resources to the ministry, as mentioned, through ontario.ca, access to the supervisor as well as worker basic training requirements and resources to fulfill those requirements. And I'll come back to this question within the chat. And certainly, Stefan, if you have noticed any others elsewhere, I'll welcome you to join me. So ensuring that public washrooms are cleaned, maintained, and recorded. There are new requirements for provided washrooms at workplaces. The first part of the requirements will be applicable as of this summer, with some follow-up as of January 1st, 2026. The expectation is that this is in the space of the workplace. So if you are a greenhouse and there is a washroom within the pack house of that greenhouse or any place within that greenhouse that is defined as the workplace, the requirements will be applicable to those facilities, not housing. So that includes not only bunk houses, but also the farmhouse on property that on occasion may be used because it is closer to that block where employees are working on property, then headed all the way back to the bunkhouse or the pack house where the workplace washroom is. So once more at this point, although more to come at the time of enforcement, I am sure, the understanding is that washrooms in the workplace, bunkhouses and farmhouses are outside of this legislation's jurisdiction, and the understanding in this moment is not applicable for those locations. Saw the thumb up. Thank you. WSPS is here to support you through the many resources shared within this session and the many more available through our health and safety consultants, account managers, as well as our website and beyond. So please do encourage you now to ask questions, but if not now, do reach out and I'll be sure to leave our contact information as the last screen. But for now, I'll prompt with a moment or so remaining. If there are any further questions within the chat you wish to contribute, any hands you wish to raise, or Stefan, if I have prompted any in your mind that you wish to return to. And it would appear quiet so far. So with that, I will leave you with our website once more, as well as further contact information. Thank you so much for joining this session, and for those in participation with questions, any further that you do have, please do reach to OFVGA as well as WSPS. And have a wonderful rest of the day. Thanks so much.